So we move to the motor neuron. But before we go to the motor neuron, we need to understand what is its role. Remember, for the sensory neuron, it is about picking information or picking the stimuli, detecting the stimuli and relaying it to the central nervous system. And then for the motor neuron, it's about the muscles, the nerve endings or the dendrites end up in the muscle. So that means that they're the motor neuron is the one that results into contraction or relaxation of muscles. Okay, so the relaxation or contraction of muscles is for some muscles it is involuntary. For example, for smooth muscles it is involuntary, and then for skeletal muscle it is under voluntary control. But all that comes basically from the brain. So that means that the motor neurons are nerve cells that carry signals from the central nervous system to the muscles, to the glands, to the organs, to initiate movement, that is for the muscles, or other activities that are actually very important physiologically. Okay? So this is what you have. You have the dendrite, you have the nucleus. So what do you notice here? What you notice here is that in comparison with the cell body in the sensory neuron, you can see that the cell body is along the axon. It actually branches away from the axon. So it has two extensions, this other extension and this extension. But for the motor neuron, we are having the cell body at the terminal, at the other end. Okay, so you have the cell body one end, and then you have the terminal dendrite the other end. So that is what differentiates motor neurons from sensory neurons in terms of structure. So the cell body contains the nucleus, mitochondria, and other organelles, for example, the ribosomes that are very important in protein synthesis. Okay, and then the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And then we have the dendrons and then the dendrites. The dendrons are the ones that give the extensions called the dendrites. So these usually can receive impulses or signals from other neurons. And basically this is where the relay neuron will basically come in. Okay, the axons are usually long and they carry the impulses to the target organs. Okay, so usually motor, if we talk about motor, usually that relates to the muscles. But again, don't forget that motor neuron does not only terminate into the muscles, it also terminates into glands, terminates into other important organs of the body, and to effect different physiological responses. So that's why basically motor neurons are the ones we term as effectors, because they are the ones that lead to the implementation of the instruction that comes from the brain or from the central nervous system. So the Schwann cell, we know that it's the one that produces the myelin sheath, which we said is fatty and is responsible for insulation. That we shall see in our subsequent presentation that actually the myelin sheath is very important in speeding up the rate of transmission of impulses. Okay, because of the fact that the impulses will be jumping from one node of ganglia to the other. And that is what we term as saltatory transmission. So generally, if we ask you to give us the adaptations of the neuron in general terms, you talk about the fact that the neurons have nuclei. That means that each neuron has a nucleus, And that nucleus is very important for physiological processes, control of physiological processes. And then we have the initial granules, basically the endoplasmic reticulum, that are very important in protein, in production of proteins and also neurotransmitters. And then the terminal dendrites that terminate either the dendrites can connect to another neuron, or they can connect to the terminal target organ, okay, to the target organ, whether it is a muscle, whether it is a gland, whether it is any other organ in the body. Okay, so these dendrites actually are many, and that increases the surface area for that connection with either other neurons or the glands or the organs. The long axons mean that they're basically like wires. If the wires are long, that means that you can send communication over a long distance. So that's the same thing that happens, because it is through the neurons that you have that information passing as electrical impulses. So if they are long, that means that you can have information moving from one part of the body to the other, even if they are distant. The maiden snip is very important for insulation and increasing the rate of transmission of the impulses through circulatory conduction.